Nearly every diabetic is desperate to try to overcome that condition if it's at all possible. Now, sadly, many don't even believe it's possible, so they really don't hardly try. What's the use of trying to do the impossible? But, if there were a button you could push that would get rid of your diabetes, we'd all push it, right? Or if there was a magic pill that you could take and suddenly all diabetes would leave. A1C would come down, fasting glucose would be perfect. You'd have no more issues, no more neuropathy. All your symptoms would go away. You'd be completely healed by simply taking a pill once a month or once a week. We'd all take it if we were convinced it would do it. But of course, there are no such pills. Yeah, there are diabetic meds that you can take that can help somewhat, but none that can really get rid of your diabetes. And that brings us to diet, which of course is what this channel is all about. If there were a diet you could embrace that you were confident, like 99% sure it would do away with your diabetes, do away with your various diabetic manifestations and symptoms, and prolong your life and your health, who would not do it? Well, probably some wouldn't. They'd just say, I love to eat too much. I love the way I've eaten. And my mama taught me to eat that way. Her mama taught her to eat that way. And I'm not about to change. I'd rather die. So sadly, there are some like that, but not most. If I could ever convince you that a certain diet would fix your diabetes and reverse all those numbers and do away with so many of your manifestations, and I'm talking about for most type 2 diabetics. Obviously, there are no guarantees, but I believe there is a diet that you can embrace that will do all of that. It will reverse your diabetes, get your numbers back into the non-diabetic range, and start to reverse all those symptoms. But the question is, what can you eat on a diabetes-beating diet? A lot of times when we first start out, we start to get what we cannot eat. I can't eat sugar anymore, that's for sure. I better lay off white flour, that's for sure. And then you get a little more knowledge and you realize starches aren't much my friends either. And the more you learn, the more depressing it gets, because you're just like, well, I can't eat this and I can't eat that and I can't eat this and I cannot eat that. What in the world can I eat? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. And today I'm going to answer it with different categories of foods that you can eat and that will normally do the job for you in bringing those glucose levels down close to normal. So today, we've got 10 categories of foods that will do the job for you. And I'm going to just start listing the categories and the foods that are in those categories. And then there's one bonus category at the end that will be a great blessing to a lot of you as well. So hang on for that bonus category. Let's get right to it. First category. And of course, not everybody's going to be able to follow this category because it is meat. And some of you are just determined you won't eat meat. And that is your business. It's not my job to tell you that you should or should not eat meat. I eat meat freely and don't feel any compunctions about it, but some people don't. But if you do eat meat, the good news is meat is essentially carb-free. Yeah, they can sometimes throw in a little extra sugar to make it better, but they usually don't put in much. But most meat has no sugar. As long as you can avoid the bread coating, you're good. So that means if you eat beef, you're not going to raise blood sugar much. Pork, the same. You can eat chicken. You're not going to get much of a blood sugar rise. Fish, not much of a blood sugar rise. Shrimp, not much of a blood sugar rise, but just don't have a bread coating on any of those things. Some people, sometimes they take shrimp and they fry it up with all kinds of a coating on there and you're getting all kinds of carbs, but otherwise you don't. As for the pros of meat, number one, almost no carbs to them, just almost no carbs at all. Secondly, they're filling. Third, they taste good. So you're able to fill up and not drive your blood sugar crazy at all. Cons, well, not so many vitamins to most meats. And protein can raise glucose a bit in some. Now, I have to be honest, I've never noticed that in my own testing and my own diet. I've never really noticed that meat makes any discernible blood sugar rise. I know the theory is that protein can raise blood sugar, and I've heard it so many times, I guess it must be true. But for me, I just haven't seen it. All right, let's get on to another category, the leafy green vegetables. Why did they call them leafy green vegetables? Well, because each one of those words is true. They're leafy, they're green, and they're vegetables. So you have kale, which has a tremendous reputation for being nutrient-dense. Microgreens, which are immature greens produced from the seeds of vegetables and herbs. Collard greens, and there's other types of greens such as mustard greens. Spinach, cabbage, beet greens, watercress, romaine lettuce. So all of these things, there's just not enough carbs to worry about them. Yeah, they're from the plant family, and a lot of people say, well, it's the plants that have all the carbs, but these don't have many, not many at all. So they're almost freebies. You could just about eat as much kale as you want. You could eat about as much spinach as you want. You could eat about as much cabbage as you want. They're just hardly any carbs to it. So the pros, they have a lot of nutrients, a lot of vitamins, very low in carbs. The cons, well, they're not especially filling. They just don't fill you up very well, and your hunger can return fairly quickly. But it's a great side dish. All right, third category, low-carb vegetables. And this would include bell peppers, broccoli, asparagus, mushrooms, zucchini, cauliflower, green beans, cucumbers, Brussel sprouts, celery, radishes, eggplant, artichokes. All of these things, they're not the leafy green vegetables. There's no leafiness to them, but they are low-carb vegetables. And low-carb vegetables are fair game for those that are trying to beat diabetes. They're not going to affect your blood sugar much at all. And similar to the leafy greens, however, they're not real filling, although they're probably more filling than the leafy greens. Those leafy green vegetables they just don't hardly fill you up at all. These will fill you up somewhat. They are nutrient dense, but the con is they don't fill you up. Now, with these two categories of vegetables, the leafy green vegetables and just the plain low-carb vegetables, you can make an endless variety of salads. And salads are the diabetic's friend. I love to have my salads around lunchtime, and then for dinner I have more of a carnivore-type meal, which puts me in good shape to go into my night and into my sleeping time without my body having to process hardly any carbs. But even with the leafy green vegetables, with most salads, there's so much fiber and there's so few carbs, it should not be a problem for most of us. Another category. Is it the third? 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth category, high-fat dairy. And I know some people just think dairy is evil, comes straight from the devil. I don't really believe that. I don't drink milk, regular milk, but I do enjoy dairy, heavy cream. I enjoy that all the time. Put it in my coffee constantly. Cheese, enjoy cheese. Very low carb, almost all cheese. Now, the kind you buy in the big block is going to be better than the packaged slices. Some people complain that all sliced cheese is bad. That's not true. There's some slices you can buy in the deli section that are not going to have hardly any carbs at all. But the kind of cheese that's packaged and processed, that's not going to be quite so good for you, although it's still better than eating a piece of bread. Butter. Some people don't think butter is dairy, but it really is. It comes from the cow. It's just handled a different way. Sour cream, cream cheese. Once again, these things have so few carbs, and yet they're very filling. So, I mean, that's a good combination, right? Low carbs, very filling. Low carbs, very filling. All these things can do the job. And those would be the main pros of this category of high-fat dairy. Low in carbs, very filling. The cons? Well, they're high in calories. So if you are trying to lose weight, you might want to limit yourself there. And then some people are allergic to dairy. And really, this goes for any of these foods I'm mentioning or these categories. If you're allergic to it or it just doesn't work, or you say, well, I can't eat much meat because I've got kidney problems, well, then don't eat it. According to the people I've read, meat and protein are not going to give you kidney problems. But if you have kidney problems, you probably want to go easy on the protein. All right, another category would be eggs. Now, I put these all by themselves as a category, even though I know it's just one food, right? Eggs. Eggs are eggs. But you can have them in so many ways, it sort of makes eggs a category to itself. You can have boiled eggs. You can have scrambled eggs. You can have omelets, egg muffins, where you create a put an egg in a muffin pan and then put some sausage in there and you bake it in the oven and then you take it out and you put some sour cream over it and maybe some pecani sauce. Pretty good. Fried eggs, of course, just all kinds of eggs. They're almost the perfect food. I hardly want to even mention any cons because they just have protein, they have fat, they're filling, they're good. You can use them in so many different ways. And there was a time when everybody said, oh, watch those eggs. And my poor mom used to buy the egg whites, so she wasn't going to get all that cholesterol. But that whole thing's been proven to be a hoax or a lie or just falsehood. And nowadays, everybody's backed off. Anybody with any sense has backed off from slamming eggs. They are just about the diabetic's best friend. And Bill Burliant left a comment. I interviewed Bill, just a wonderful guy. But he left a comment how that if his main foods that he has for his meal don't quite fill him up, he just has some boiled eggs and he'll just take one boiled egg and add it to the meal, and then that will bring him over the top to where he's full. So eggs are great. Another category, nuts and seeds. Almost any nuts are going to be relatively low carb, except cashews. Stay away from cashews. There are almost twice as much carbs in cashews than in almost any other nuts. So cashews are not your friend. Almost every other nut will be your friend, and some better than others. Pecans have a great reputation. Macadamia nuts have a great reputation. Even peanuts, and I know people will protest with great indignation. Peanuts are not even nuts, but they look like a nut. They act like a nut. They have about the same carbs as most other nuts. So what's the saying about quacks like a duck? Nuts kind of quack like a duck, you might say. So sunflower seeds, also seeds, are low in carbs and they're high in fiber. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. Flax seeds not something you're going to just eat like a snack, but you might sprinkle it on certain foods. So pros on nuts and seeds. They taste great. They're low in carbs. They're filling. They have a lot of fiber. They'll help you with constipation. The cons, it's difficult to limit yourself sometimes when you have a nice big bowl of nuts or pumpkin seeds that have been salted and you just want to eat and eat and eat and eat. And then you end up, the carbs go a bit high and the calories go high as well. So you got to be self-controlled with nuts and seeds. And for some people, they're better off just leaving them out of their house because they can't handle them in terms of self-control. But if you can, they make a nice addition to meals. And you can put some nuts or some seeds on your salads to give them a little extra zing. Good deal. And they're not very high in carbs. Another negative about nuts is they're very slow to dissolve. Well, you might say that's a positive, and it is really. They're slow to dissolve, which means they're very easy on glucose spikes. They're just not going to create hardly any kind of a spike, but they last for a long time. They're so hard. If you hold a nut in your hand and you hold a piece of bread in your hand, the bread's soft and spongy, the nut is hard. So guess which one's going to dissolve quicker? The bread will. So it'll give you a quicker spike, and then you'll head down pretty quick. The nuts, they'll be kind of like putting a log in the fireplace, a big old heavy log. It'll burn for a long time. So you fill your stomach with nuts and they'll burn for a long time. They won't release a lot of carbs. You won't get a big spike, but it may take you hours to go really down to baseline. So that is something to consider. Another category is fruits. You might say, well, Dennis, don't you discourage people from eating fruit? Well, as a general rule, I do. But what I'm talking about are the sweet fruits. But avocados are fruits, and they have actually somewhat quite a few carbs. Even a smaller avocado is going to have 12, 15 grams of carbs. A bigger one could have as much as 20, 22 grams. But so much of that is fiber. And again, that's where the net carbs thing works, because if you don't discount the net carbs, the fiber carbs, you're going to be scared to death of avocados because one of them can put you up to 15, 17 grams of carbs, which if you're doing strict keto, 20 grams is probably your limit. So anyway. All right. But avocados work great. Strawberries are another. Strawberries and blackberries and raspberries are great in moderation. Strawberries and blackberries are so low in carbs, you almost don't have to be too moderate with them. Others, you do have to be a bit moderate. Blueberries are not quite as good. they're going to add up. And a lot of people find that out from their glucose meter after testing, and they discover that they just really don't do too well with blueberries. But strawberries and blackberries particularly are excellent. Tomatoes are a fruit, technically, although a lot of times we don't think of them as being a fruit. You got to be a bit careful with tomatoes. You can't just pig out, but who would want to pig out on tomatoes anyway, right? Olives are a fruit, and they work. Coconuts, as long as it's not sweetened coconut, they're low carb. Lemons and limes are fruits, and they are low carb as well. So the pros about these kind of fruits, not every fruit, we're not talking about mangoes here, not talking about apples and peaches and oranges and so forth, but for these kind of fruits, they give our diet a little zest, they add some vitamins. And as far as the cons, really there are hardly any cons to speak of as long as you're self-controlled. One surprising fruit is the grapefruit. Grapefruits are so sour you would think, well, they don't have any carbs. There's hardly any sweetness to them. And yet most grapefruits really have too many carbs to eat a whole grapefruit anyway. If you eat about half of a smaller one, you might get by with it, but not a whole one. Another category would be the nut flour breads, muffins, and mug cakes. We have discovered, the keto world has discovered, and it's all over the internet, it's all over YouTube, that you can grind nuts into flour. And of course, the most popular one is the almond flour, but there are others. And there's coconut flour, and there's pecan flour, there's walnut flour. They usually get more expensive. Coconut flour is about the cheapest. But you can use nut flours and make all kinds of breads and muffins and mug cakes, all kinds of things. They have even made peanut butter bread, and I've never tried it, but the person who was demonstrating how to do it acted like it's quite tasty. I'm going to have to try it one of these days. So, using nut flours and things like mug cakes and so forth, it enables you to have things that you might not otherwise think you could ever have. You can have breads. You can have little cakes. I can make a strawberry shortcake out of a mug cake made with almond and coconut flour and a couple of other ingredients, and then put some strawberries and some whipped cream on it, and bam! It's a tremendous, tremendous thing to have with some coffee on a Saturday night. So negatives, well, some people could be allergic to them. If you say, well, almonds don't work for me, almond flour wouldn't work, well, then don't eat it. But for a lot of us, they will work. And then, of course, check with your glucose meter to make sure that you're not spiking too much. Another category would be the keto desserts. That would also include mug cakes, but also a lot of other things. Chocolate nut clusters, I just love. You could just have a few strawberries and some whipped cream over it. Pumpkin pie, there's a way to convert some of the ingredients to a standard pumpkin pie and use an almond crust. And you can have a relatively low-carb pumpkin pie. And then there's that chocolate-drizzled orange cheesecake that I make. And I just think that is like the mother of all keto desserts. It's just fantastic. I think it's sad sometimes when I hear somebody read some comment and somebody says, well, I just can't give up my sweets. You don't have to, really. Although I will say this, limit them. Don't have a keto dessert with every meal or every day. You need to go days where you don't have it. I encourage people that are doing our challenges to have them over the weekends, maybe 2 nights per week, maybe a Friday night and a Saturday night over the weekend, and treat yourself. You've been a good boy. You've been a good girl all this week. Now you're going to have a keto dessert, not a regular dessert, but a keto dessert. So they work. But check with your glucose meter. Not every dessert that calls itself keto or every snack that calls itself keto will work. Condiments as a category, mustard, for example, to put on certain things is almost always perfect. If you eat hot dogs once in a while, you can just smear mustard up and down that hot dog, and it's not going to be a problem. Mayonnaise, unless it is sweetened mayonnaise, will work. It usually has 0 carbs. And there are, of course, videos on how to make your own mayonnaise, but you can buy 0-carb mayonnaise at the store. Picante sauce, a much better choice than ketchup. So sometimes I'll have a hamburger and I'll put some picante sauce on it. Another thing I sometimes do is I buy sugar-free barbecue sauce, and it's sweetened with some other sweetener than sugar, and it works beautifully, and it makes my hamburger seem more like I'm eating steak. So dressings for salads, 2 of the ones that I prefer that I know are relatively low carb would be ranch and Italian. Now, not every ranch dressing is low carb. Not every Italian, but most of them are. So check. If you see that for a serving size, it's only 1 or 2 grams of carbs, you're in business. That's good. But I've seen some ranch dressings that are like 8 or 9 grams of carbs. And I'm like, why would they make it so high in carbs? I guess they just wanted it extra sweet. And then, so those are the 10 categories, but here's the bonus category. And again, it's just really a food. It's a tortilla. But I know that some of you, especially those of you from a Hispanic heritage, you love tortillas, and that has been a standard part of your life. And for you, giving up a tortilla is about like someone else giving up sugar. It's just almost unthinkable. How could I give up tortillas? I've been eating them all my life. My mama ate them all her life, and on we could go. Well, the answer is there are several types of low-carb tortillas you can make. I have videos on how to do a microwave tortilla that just takes a couple of minutes to make, and you have to have the right ingredients. And then my latest find was the lupin flour tortilla. I had never even heard of lupin flour. What in the world is lupin flour? But I've got a video on that, and I think that looks more like a tortilla, tastes more like a tortilla. I think that's the number one low-carb tortilla. Now, you can buy store-bought tortillas that say low-carb or keto-friendly. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So you really have to check with your glucose meter about an hour and 15 minutes after you have your meal to see. But one rule I follow religiously is that if I do have a store-bought low-carb tortilla, I will only have one. So if I'm eating a meal where normally I might have 2 or 3, I'll just have one and I'll fill up on other things. So you can do so many things with tortillas. It's just amazing. You can make breakfast burritos. You can make you can put them in tacos, put tacos in them rather. There's all kinds of things you can do with tortillas, as you Hispanics well know. And you can do it. It'll take a little extra work. So let me just sum up all of this by a few thoughts. Number one, it's not as bad as you think. Some people just whine when they hear that their diet has to significantly change. And they're like, I might as well be dead. This is just terrible. I can't enjoy anything. Or some will say, I might as well just eat bread and crackers or whatever, which crackers would not be a good choice. But no, there's all kinds of ways to enjoy your diet. Once you get this thing rolling, it works well, and you enjoy your meals. But I will admit, you cannot be lazy. You can't sit around and just say, well, I don't want to do any research. I don't want to watch any videos. I don't want to read any books. I just want to be able to go to the store and buy my food and come home and eat it. Well, good luck with that. It's not going to work for you. You're going to have to research. You're going to have to watch videos. You're going to have to go to YouTube and type in keto this and keto that and low carb this and low carb that. But if you say, this is too overwhelming, Dennis, I just can't learn all this at once. You don't have to. You can start out simply eating for lunch, let's say, make that your breakfast. Have your breakfast time, you just have some bulletproof coffee or maybe one boiled egg. For lunch, you have a real meal and just make it eggs and bacon or eggs and sausage or eggs and ham. So essentially, your lunch becomes like a breakfast meal. Then for supper, you can have meat, pork, chicken, fish, beef, whatever, as long as it doesn't have a big breaded coating on it. So some kind of meat and a salad of low carb and leafy vegetables. Bam! There it is. You say, well, I don't know if that'd fill me up. Then have an extra piece of meat or have an extra big salad. You can do it. And it's worth it. You are worth it, my friend, to extend your life, to keep you out of the hospital, to keep you from having a stroke at the age of 54, and enable you to live to be 84 in good health and pass quietly from this life having had a healthy life, an extended life, is well worth it. You are worth it. Say this to yourself right where you're watching me. I am worth it. In God's eyes, you're valuable. And you should think of yourself that way as well.